Welcome to A Cup of Tea. I'm Judy Stephenson, Professor of Economic History at UCL. Today I'm going to be having a cup of tea with Professor Philip Schofield, Professor of the History of
Legal and Political Thought.
Legal and Political Thought. Sorry, such a mouthful, I got tripped up there. Yeah. We're interested in how academic research changes the world. And tea being a global commodity, but also a great British tradition. Our first question was, what are you taking? And you said?
We're having Yorkshire tea.
Thank you.
But no, it's very difficult for me to have chosen Yorkshire tea.
Difficult?
Yeah. Well, because I'm from Lancashire. I mean, nothing good comes out of Yorkshire. I suppose the good news is that Fahad, our wonderful security officer here, tells me that the tea actually comes from Kenya.
Probably, and lots of good things come out of Kenya, including tea.
Yeah.
Nothing good comes out of Yorkshire? Well, thank you, because it's rather a pleasure for me to have a decent cup of tea, so welcome.
Thank you.
So our first question for you was, if you had £1 million today to spend on the research that you wanted to see, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I would say I want 10 million.
Shrewd move in today's academic environment, yeah.
Because my main task is as general editor of the new edition of the collected works of Jeremy Bentham, and it is a constant struggle to find funds. So yes, I'd be very pleased to take your £1 million and we'd use it in order to progress with the edition. The problem with UK academia, from our point of view, is that there is no long-term funding for research projects. So I've spent a great deal of my time fundraising. So £1 million would give me, well, let's say 21 years of a researcher, or 3 researchers for 5, well, maybe 3 researchers for 6 years each, and
those are postdocs, yeah.
A postdoc, and we could, we bring out 5 or 6 volumes in that time, probably more. So I would probably make sure we did Bentham with that sort of money, Rationale Judicial Evidence, which is a massive 5-volume text, and if there's a bit left over, maybe Constitutional Code and the rest of Constitutional Code, 2 of Bentham's major writings. I mean, I could go back and say, the Bentham Project, which is doing this work, was established by the College Council, University College, in 1959, with an estimate that there will be about 35 volumes in the edition. We are just about to publish volume 37, and I think there will be at least 50 more.
Wow.
So it's a massive enterprise, and that's why I think, if we had 10 million, that might get us to the end of it. So £1 million would be a very, very nice start.
So let's say we get £1 million and we got those 3 postdocs for 6 years.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
I mean, there are 2 sources. One is the printed text, which Bentham himself published.
Yeah.
And he probably published 50 pamphlets, works of various sorts. And that ranges from short pamphlets of 12 or 16 pages right up through the Rationale of Judicial Evidence, which is 2,500 pages long. So if we're starting with manuscripts, the first thing we have to do is get an accurate transcript of them. And there's a whole series of processes which we have to go through to take those manuscripts and turn them into a coherent text. Just reading Bentham's handwriting is difficult in itself, and with crossings out, interlineations, notes in the margin. And you don't start at page 1 and go to page 200 and there's your text, because the stuff's all mixed up, and Bentham would rewrite. So you have to understand how Bentham himself was constructing that text at each major stage in its development. But eventually we'll get a text.
So I'm a historian and I work with archival sources a lot, and people say to me, oh, but AI does this for you now. So can machine learning or artificial intelligence help with the transcribing and the sort of gathering before the analysis, or what contribution can it make to this sort of work?
Yeah, we as the Bentham Project were very much involved in the Transcribers Project, which applied artificial intelligence to reading handwritten text. It works very well on straightforward text. But the people we work with, the computer scientists and other technicians, took Bentham's manuscripts as particularly interesting because they were challenging in various ways. And so far, AI has been hopeless, absolutely hopeless.
Yeah.
And even if AI produces an initial transcript, you then have to check it.
Yeah, this is our experience on things like the customs records, on other archival sources,
Right.
And it makes inhuman assumptions about the relationships between different things on the page and stuff as well. So.
I mean, the way we operate is we have Transcribe Bentham, which is a scholarly crowdsourcing initiative, which has now been going 15 years, probably one of the longest running digital humanities projects. And we get real people to take images and produce transcripts. And volunteers have produced over 40,000 pages of manuscripts. So we're now quite often able to use those initial transcripts as our starting point for transcription, whereas we would otherwise have to do them in-house. And we, of course, acknowledge the volunteers in the prefaces to the volumes.
Yeah.
So they've made a genuine contribution to the promotion of scholarship, which is fantastic.
This is a huge research impact story again, but
Yeah.
so it's obviously a really fascinating field, the history of laws, but also the Bentham Project. Tell me a little bit about how you got into both.
I work on Bentham. I suppose the quick answer is because UCL pays me to.
Good reason?
Yeah, I did my first degree at Manchester, and I still remember the conversation now. In those days, you got a scholarship from the Department of Education and Science to do a PhD. It was called a Major State Scholarship. And you sort of applied to do it at your own university, but then when you got the money, you could go anywhere, you could take it anywhere. And so I had this vision of, going to Oxford or Cambridge and, becoming a real intellectual. So I went to see Frank O'Gorman and said, I wanted to do something in 18th century politics, and I had a plan to work on a group of politicians called the Chathamites. Mm. I was always interested in ideas and the relationship between ideas and practice in politics. And talking to Dr. O'Gorman, he said, there's nobody at Oxford or Cambridge who can do this. You should go to University College London, to Ian Christie. And he picked the phone up, talked to Professor Christie, arranged me to go for an interview. I did not want to come to London. It seemed a horrible big place for a little lad from the centre of Lancashire. But I came, and it's the best decision I ever made. One of my examiners was John Dinwiddie, who had just finished a 5-year stint as general editor of the Bentham Project. I said nothing about Bentham in my thesis. I started reading Bentham and thought, this is awfully boring. Come the next summer, having got my PhD, I was applying for teaching jobs and about to go for an interview. And I got a letter from John Dinwiddie through the post saying, there's a 1-year post at the Bentham Project, do you want it? And so I was offered a 1-year post. I think as a research assistant.
What year was that?
That was 1984, 1st of October 1984.
So
I started here.
The year's going well?
And
so far? So 30 years later, how many people are behind you or coming into the project? Or chipping at your heels?
The trouble is how many people have been through the project because of the funding situation.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment there are 4 of us. 2 of us are funded full-time by laws. But my other 2 researchers are on, they call them permanent contracts, but they're temporary. And we've got a new grant application into the AHRC, which we should hear about very soon, which, if it's successful, will secure a 1 post. I mean, the thing about the Bentham Project is it's not an initiative of an individual scholars or a group of scholars or a particular department. It was a central college initiative.
Yeah.
And, well, it goes back to the 1930s when a committee was first established to edit Bentham's papers. It had people on it like von Hayek, Piero Schaffer, Charles K. Ogden.
Okay, I need to look that stuff up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, in fact, but the war intervened before it got going. But when the committee was it was back in the 1950s when A.J. Eyre, the philosopher, was here. He said to college, either you should sell these manuscripts, the Bentham manuscripts, of which there are 80,000 pages in the college library, or sell them to a university that will edit them. So they decided to set up the Bentham Committee.
So UCL wants to document Bentham and wants to celebrate Bentham. Why? Why is it important to UCL particularly? I mean, origin story plus.
So the story you traditionally hear is that Bentham was the founder of UCL and that's why he left his body to college. Of course, neither of those things are true, though there is some truth in the first one about him having influence on the founding of the college. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can argue, I think quite convincingly, that the people who were the real movers and shakers were very close to Bentham. And I'm thinking here of Henry Broome and James Mill, and that his educational ideas had a very strong influence.
So tell us about the values particularly. I mean, there's misconceptions about Bentham. Dispel the most common ones and tell me what's particularly relevant to the UCL story in those, either in those misconceptions or in the truth.
I mean, the misconceptions about Bentham are many, both from serious scholars to sort of popular imagination, right from the status of the auto-icon through to the panopticon prison scheme, through to such claims as Bentham was responsible for Hitler.
How do they the connection to Hitler?
Oh well, it's something about utilitarianism.
So what's the most popular misconception about utilitarianism?
You often hear it said, utilitarianism will, doesn't take seriously the distinction between persons. Another is that it leads to the tyranny of the majority. And the thing about utilitarianism, and I'm thinking here of the Benthamite version of it, is that nothing is ruled out. So there are no absolute, let's say, commitments to some particular moral standard or some, the reason that utilitarians are always open to discuss issues which other people say are taboo. And Bentham wrote one of his most famous critiques was of what were then called natural rights, today would perhaps be called human rights.
Yeah.
Bentham always questioned the dogmatism involved, or the claims to infallibility involved, in saying that we are laying down these rights and these have always existed and always will exist. He thought that was, let's say, a claim to infallibility. You've always got to be aware that circumstances may change, and in changed circumstances, different courses of action may be appropriate.
So being an optimist, is that why UCL, the project is important to UCL? Or is that just why it's important to scholarship? You're constantly being...
I mean, Bentham is important to UCL in terms of its history and its ethos. But it's wider than that, in that here you have a major philosopher whose writings are, if you like, buried in manuscripts, of which we don't have a proper appreciation because we don't have a proper edition. And Bentham's importance is way beyond UCL. Yeah. It's to philosophy generally. And the more of the stuff we get out, the more people recognise what a great thinker Bentham actually was.
So today, we're in the middle of an era where governments are unpicking the basics of rights, democracy, all these sorts of things. What have the Bentham Project got to give us on that?
Yeah. I mean, on one level, I say we're not here to solve problems, because we're here to provide the materials for others to solve problems. So, I mean, we have two roles. One is the purely scholarly role of getting the material out in an authentic way.
Yeah.
But having said that, as I then become an interpreter of that material, in terms of the issues you've mentioned, Bentham was one of the founders of liberalism. He regarded himself as a liberal, and so there are arguments, there are resources in his writings which supporters of the liberal political system can use, and also to remind themselves of what the founders of liberalism saw as important. But that's sort of one aspect of Bentham's thought, but he was also as much to say in terms of the detail of how you might go about achieving these ends. And some of that is, it's been overtaken by events, by technology, let's say, but the principles are remarkably similar.
Wow. So in terms of, you told us a bit about your current work.
Yeah.
In terms of the volumes and the project, if there's one thing that you could have like 2 weeks off to do, finish, what would that be? And what are the particular barriers or challenges to doing it at the moment?
So there's nothing that'll take 2 weeks in Bentham.
Okay.
I need sort of 2 years. I reckon to produce a Bentham volume, it's about 5 person years work.
That's not bad. 5 person years.
I mean that's probably that's probably what it takes. I mean, in a couple of weeks I could do an article, and we've just had a conference in Hamburg with the German Society for Utilitarian Studies on what's called Bentham's political constitutionalism. So on Bentham's democratic theory. So I wrote a piece on that, on the chief executive functionary, as Bentham called it. In other words, the head of state, a monarch in a monarchy, or president in a republic.
What does he make of our little monarchical, fudge that is the parliamentarian sovereignty?
Yeah, I mean, Bentham would have abolished the monarchy and the House of Lords. He has a very different conception of the way in which we should structure our democratic regime. So he rejects the idea of the balance of powers or the separation of powers. He thought rather in terms of like chains of what he calls subordination and superordination. So you'd have the people as sovereign, and they would elect a single chamber legislature who would then elect a prime minister and a justice minister. And so the executive and the judiciary would be placed beneath the legislature, and they would be placed beneath the people.
So what is the scariest thing you've ever had to do as a researcher?
And it's also one of the most interesting things. I went to Colombia in 2002, to Bogota, and there's a private university there called Rosario University.
Yeah.
And they elected a new rector who was a radical. He was a heart surgeon, and Professor Ramirez. And Bentham's books had been banned at Rosario University in I think way back in the 1820s. And so as a gesture, the new rector decided he would have a ceremony to unban Bentham's books. So I was invited over as the Bentham expert to talk on Bentham at an extraordinary ceremony. But what I remember was, and I visited another university, I had to fly to another place in Colombia from Bogota, and I was sitting in my hotel room the night before and watching the BBC World News, and on it came a report saying, and today in the world's most dangerous country, Colombia, an aeroplane has been hijacked.
Oh God.
So that didn't fill me with a great deal of confidence. I mean, it was only when I got to the airport the next morning and saw the plane was packed that I thought, well, everyone else is going, so I should be all right. But that was quite scary at the time. I mean, the Bogota, there were parts of it were absolutely fantastic, and then there were other parts. They wouldn't let me go out by myself.
Okay.
I had to be escorted because they said you can go around the corner and you're in, you can be in trouble. And the British council who organised this had a driver, and going through the streets at night, he wouldn't stop at red lights.
Yeah.
Just too dangerous to stop the van. But the people there were amazing, and apart from feeling scared all the time, it wasn't that. It was a fantastic experience.
Now, normally I have to ask people, what's your favourite author or researcher? Or, obviously Bentham.
Yeah, I know it's a bit obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit obvious. But if there is somebody who you find either inspirational or challenging or interesting or different in relation to how they address the business of research, who would you say?
Probably one of the greatest influences on me was somebody I never met, was Louis Namier, the British historian, who was actually the mentor of Ian Christie, my PhD supervisor.
Okay, tell us a bit more about Namier.
And Namier wrote some very influential books on 18th century British politics. And in fact, Namier was very dismissive of ideas, so it's a sort of a strange thing to say. But what I admired was the detail and the accuracy of Namier's work. I mean, his famous book was England in the Age of the American Revolution, and he sort of analysed the workings of Parliament and tried to show it was all to do with connections, people doing favours for other people. Yeah. And I was just fascinated by the detail of the research. And so I think applying that method but to ideas was very, been sort of, I suppose how I would characterise what I try to do. Yeah. And we need that in the Bentham edition when we're writing our annotation. Because what we try to do is, make the text readable for the modern reader. We don't try and interpret it. We leave that to the secondary literature. But we, think we're doing a service, we hope, by, where there's an event, a person, explaining it for the sake of the contemporary
and
reader.
In a meticulous way. But it adds to impact. I mean, Namier sees that everything is the old corruption and the connections and the nepotism persists, 70 years later for that exact reason, because it is so empiric, I guess. Yeah. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, so if there were 3 significant problems in the world, if you think of big problems in the world today, that Bentham and the Bentham Project could help, what are they?
I don't think we could help with anything.
Useful knowledge.
Yeah,
useful knowledge. It is useful. You've just justified why it is useful. Yeah, so 3 significant problems.
I don't see as sort of answering problems. It's I often thought that if academia is an ivory tower, which it isn't anymore, if it ever was, then we're in the attic. So I think in terms of doing the edition, what we're trying to do is
3 things it can affect.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is to bring out the authentic Bentham, and then what impact can that have? I mean, I think one is in the area of political thought, and is justification for liberal democracy, which is under threat.
It needs some support.
And if you look at the utilitarian tradition, let's say, of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, together they are a fantastic resource.
Yeah.
So another area might be in relation to prisons. I mean, the Panopticon, which has been so criticised by all sorts of people,
Yeah.
following Foucault.
Yeah.
Is actually a very humane and, again, liberal approach to the problem of what you do with people who have committed crimes. And you know, the prisoners are not treated like dirt.
Yeah.
So, you know, Bentham wants to give these people a chance. You know, it's so different from the vision that Foucault puts forward.
Yeah.
So we're working on Bentham's Panopticon writings at the moment, so I'm hoping that will have an important aspect there. And the other area is just the reform of the law. In his ideal system, he would have abolished the jury. But that was in the context of a codified system of law.
Okay.
And where under the common law, he saw it, as other radicals did, as at least potentially offering some resistance to government. For instance, in a trial for sedition,
Yes.
occasionally the jury would let the person off even though they were obviously
Seditious.
guilty of what
Yeah.
had been charged. So what Bentham wanted was an inquisitorial system. He said, you know, the point of a trial is to get to the truth, as opposed to the adversarial system, where it's like you get two sides fighting each other and seeing who's standing at the end.
Do you think that that's still useful today?
Yeah.
The inquisitorial system?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me to make perfect sense. Don't we want to know what the truth is?
Right, second last question then. AI, how are you using it? Is it going to, just in terms of your job as a researcher, is it going to transform your job or is it going to take your job?
I think it's irrelevant to
Yeah.
our job. I call it artificial idiocy. It should be banned from education.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is a Benthamite point. He said, you know, he's talking about learning, and he says, getting your lesson is an animating experience. So, thinking through a problem and coming up with your own solution to it is a pleasure. It gives you a pleasure, and you lose that by being told what to say by some machine.
Okay, so understanding Bentham, what are your hopes and fears for academic research, and particularly academic research in political economy, laws, our understanding of how society works going forward? Hopes and fears.
I think what worries me is the way in which quality time has been eroded for many academics. In order to do good research, you need to have space, and increasingly it's being taken away. I mean, just one example of that, in this faculty, the students used to get one crack at the exam, and now because of directions from the big bosses, we have to have 2 exams, a summer resit, and that has increased the workload massively.
Yeah, that's taken away the month or so you had for writing, didn't it?
Yeah. So that's just one example of the issue. We need quality time to do good research, and people are still trying to do it and are achieving it, but the cost is stress.
Fair enough. Well, this has been a very unstressful but very challenging and interesting cup of tea. Thank you very much for sharing a cup of tea with us and all your knowledge on Bentham and everything else. And here's to the rest of the project and £10 million at least.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.